Imagine launching one of the biggest MMOs of all time, and then watching 97.2% of your players vanish like a fart in the wind. That's the story of Lost Ark, a game that once had 1.3 million players online at the same time in early 2022, now struggles to reach just 37,000 players during peak hours. Not even Thanos could snap away an audience that fast. So what went wrong? Grab your snacks and maybe a clown mask, because we're about to roast every mistake that led to this disaster. From the Korean OG version to Amazon's global release, we're diving into the flaming wreckage of a game undone by grind, greed, bots, burnout, and broken promises. Strap in, heroes of Arkesia. This post-mortem is less heroic tale, more tragic comedy. Welcome to the honing circus, where your gear upgrades are the main attraction. And by attraction, we mean a sadistic carnival game. Progressing in Lost Ark isn't about skill or mastery. It's about sacrificing your sanity to RNGesus and praying your weapon upgrade doesn't explode in your face. You don't level up, you gamble. You feed the machine an expensive cocktail of guardian stones, leap stones, fusion materials, gold, and your will to live, all for a chance at a 1% stat boost. And did we mention the part where it fails? A lot? Every time you hone your gear, there's a very real chance it fails outright, consuming your materials, wasting your time, and mocking your efforts. Each tier of upgrade increases the fail rate, requiring a mountain of resources just to roll the dice again. It's not progression, it's ritual humiliation. The game effectively says, "Congratulations on reaching Tier 3. Now run the same dungeons 500 more times or open your wallet." Because nothing screams player engagement like grinding identical content for weeks to maybe hit plus 15 on your weapon. The honing system could be classified as the 8th deadly sin. It's vertical progression masquerading as fun, a Vegas slot machine rigged by Smilegate, where the house always wins and you pay in pain. Western players, having no cultural prep for this level of grind, understandably lost their minds. Smilegate took the worst parts of Korean MMORPG gear upgrading and went, "Let's give the global audience the full experience." Players were not amused. They were maulding, mad and balding from stress, as their 15th honing attempt failed at a 90% success chance. Why stop at disappointment when you can offer despair? The Korean version at least had years of catch-up mechanics and event support to ease the suffering. The global version? They hit the gas and launched players straight into the honed meat grinder. The result? A massive chunk of players hit a progression wall and simply noped out of the game. When your core leveling mechanic feels like a rigged carnival game, don't be shocked when the tent is empty and the clowns pack up. If the honing grind is the disease, the cash shop is the snake oil cure. Lost Ark's monetization ensured that anyone with a fat wallet could bypass the honing nightmare, or at least grease the wheels of RNG just enough to get ahead. Why slog through hundreds of chaos dungeons and guardian raids for upgrade materials when you can just whip out mom's credit card and buy stacks of gold and mats? The game is technically free to play, but let's not pretend it doesn't shove you face first into the pay-to-win buffet. Swipe for convenience, swipe for progress. Swipe for that gleaming plus 15 weapon, while the F2P crowd is still trying to escape Punika like it's quicksand. This so-called optional spending is just a sugar-coated bribe to skip a process that's deliberately agonizing. When your normal upgrade path feels like crawling through broken glass, the cash shop starts looking mighty comfy. Even Asmongold saw the warning signs early on. When Argos, Lost Ark's first major endgame raid, dropped just a month into launch and required item level 1370, it was clear the design favored spenders. He called it out. The raid is effectively pay to win, since hitting 1370 so quickly required either ridiculous luck, ungodly grind, or, you guessed it, real money. His prediction? That Lost Ark would hemorrhage players if it stayed on that trajectory. And guess what? It did. The community wasn't blind. Players immediately noticed the chasm between whales and mortals. In PvE content, spenders catapulted into Legion raids, while average Joes were stuck farming alts in Tier 2 like medieval serfs. The devs tried to spin it with the usual PR babble. It's pay for convenience, not pay to win. Sure, buddy, but when players are buying gold, dumping it into Mari's secret shop, and steamrolling content you can't even enter without spending, that convenience becomes a straight-up gate. Amazon and Smilegate eventually had to admit the obvious. The rushed Argos launch made Lost Ark feel pay to win. When your own publisher has to pen an apology because your game feels like a corporate casino, you know something went sideways. Lost Ark effectively split into two experiences. One for the paying elite enjoying luxury Tier 3, and one for the free players grinding repetitive chores and praying their upgrade doesn't fail at 60%. In Lost Ark's economy, the most powerful names weren't guild leaders or PvP legends. They were Visa, MasterCard, and American Express, laughing all the way to the bank. You think the remaining players kept Lost Ark afloat? Oh, sweet summer child. It was the bots all along. Yes, those spam bots and script kiddie bot armies infesting every corner of Arkesia have been the game's real MVPs, most valuable population. For a solid stretch, Lost Ark's servers were basically Westworld. If you saw another player zooming in a perfectly straight line with a name like Os I Astvekakel, congrats. You just encountered one of the many bots running the same brain-dead farming route on repeat. Early on, Lost Ark was so popular that Amazon couldn't spin up servers fast enough. Then the curtain was pulled back. Turns out half of those players were bots grinding for gold 24/7. The chat? Wall-to-wall gold spam. The starter zones? A synchronized conga line of berserker bots, all moving in creepy unison. And the economy? Completely wrecked. It was a bot democalypse. Amazon and Smilegate tried to go full Terminator on them, swinging the banhammer in massive waves. In March 2022 alone, over 1 million bot accounts were wiped off the map. It was like a digital biblical purge. The result? The concurrent player count dropped by 2/3. Turns out the game wasn't bursting with players, it was just infested. And it didn't stop there. New bots kept spawning like Hydra heads. For every one banned, 2 more took its place and started advertising cheap gold, 1,000 gold for just $1, and sliding into your DMs with phishing links. The anti-cheat systems? Let's just say they were more decorative than effective. Being free to play made it laughably easy for cheaters to just roll up new accounts and get back to farming like nothing happened. Eventually, Smilegate threw in CAPTCHAs and phone verifications, but for ages it felt like bots outnumbered humans. And in a twist worthy of a sitcom, one 2023 ban wave accidentally nuked a bunch of real players, some of whom hadn't even logged in for months. Imagine waking up to an email saying you were banned for botting, when the only thing you've botted recently is your social life. Amazon had to backtrack, apologize, and unban the falsely accused. It was peak comedy. Meanwhile, legit players couldn't catch a break. Good luck fighting against bot-driven inflation. Public chat? A scrolling billboard for shady gold sellers unless you micromanaged your filters. At some point, the game stopped being a massive multiplayer online role-playing game and started feeling more like an AI-powered economic experiment with a handful of human spectators. The bots stayed longer. They worked harder. They didn't complain. Honestly, they might have had a better time. In any MMO, communication from the devs and publishers is key. In Lost Ark's case, Smilegate, the developer in Korea, and Amazon, the Western publisher, sometimes felt like disconnected parents trying to raise a rebellious game child. The community often got mixed messages or straight-up radio silence on important issues. Content roadmap clarity, forget it. Keeping the player base guessing became a tradition. Reassurances about fixing core problems. Maybe a corporate blog post with enough buzzwords to make a PR intern proud, but little real substance. It turned into a running joke that the only time we heard from the team was when things went sideways, either through overdue apologies or vague promises about looking into it. One of the most iconic blunders? The infamous Argos raid disaster. Amazon rolled out a major endgame raid just weeks after launch, assuming players would be geared and ready. Spoiler alert, they weren't. Most were still slogging through Tier 1 content, while bots and real money trading had already inflated material costs. The community backlash was swift, and to their credit, Amazon actually admitted fault. "We made a mistake releasing the March game update too quickly after launch," they said, owning up to overestimating player progression and underestimating the economic distortion from bots and whales. It was a rare moment of clarity, right after the damage had already been done. This communication breakdown wasn't a one-off. Korean players got flashy live events like Loan with developer Q and Ass, future content reveals, and a game director who became a minor celebrity. Meanwhile, Western players were left piecing together information from scattered forum posts and cryptic patch notes. Basic questions like, when is the next class release? Why is this system missing? Are you fixing the bot infestation? Were either ignored or met with canned responses that felt like they came from a support ticket generator. Community managers like Rox did what they could, but it often felt like Amazon and Smilegate were stuck in a long-distance relationship with terrible Wi-Fi. One in Seoul, the other in Seattle, and apparently no one remembered how to send an email. This disconnection led to all sorts of avoidable fiascos, like last-minute update delays with zero warning, or Korean features taking months to make it west with no explanation. All of this fed into a larger perception that the devs were out of touch and painfully slow to react. When players are already frustrated with the core gameplay grind, monetization, or bot problems, the last thing they want is to be ignored. But rather than calm the storm, Smilegate and Amazon often chose to stay silent until it reached disaster levels, then drop a somber, "We hear you" statement, like they were writing an obituary. By that point, most of the damage was irreversible. The trust was gone. Players had either mentally checked out or were already on Reddit writing heartfelt goodbye posts and uninstalling the game. You know that feeling when a game throws so much at you, so fast, that you're more stressed than hyped? Lost Ark's global launch absolutely nailed that chaos. In a rush to bridge the gap with years of Korean content, Amazon decided to hit the gas and never let up. New raids, new continents, new classes, all rapid-fired at players like a never-ending shotgun blast of updates. On paper, that sounds amazing, but in practice, it became an anxiety-inducing hamster wheel of FOMO. Players barely had time to recover from one Legion raid before the next showed up with an even steeper item level requirement. It wasn't progression, it was a treadmill from hell, speeding up every week. Skip a few days, congratulations, you're now obsolete. Another patch just dropped, and guess what? You're not geared enough to participate. The developers insisted they were avoiding burnout with their update cadence. Spoiler alert, that didn't go as planned. Instead of keeping players engaged, it pressured them into treating Lost Ark like an unpaid internship. You either logged in daily and ticked off a never-ending checklist of dailies, weeklies, and events, or you watched your character fall behind like it missed the school bus. Even the events had a FOMO twist. Limited-time events like the Arkesia Grand Prix dangled valuable honing mats in front of players. Skip them, and your progression slowed to a crawl. It wasn't optional content. It was time-gated homework disguised as fun. The fear of missing out morphed into actual stress. Completionists were setting alarms around reset timers and planning vacations around event calendars. And the irony? Content updates are supposed to bring excitement, not existential dread. Even hardcore fans were begging for a break. "Please, for the love of Silmail, slow down," became a common cry. But of course, in true MMO fashion, some ultra grinders whined whenever there wasn't a content drop, so the devs were stuck in a lose-lose situation. Too slow? The game's dead. Too fast? Everyone burns out. Amazon and Smilegate chose chaos. They bet Western players would love the firehose approach. Instead, most just drowned. The Korean version had years to naturally stack this content. The global audience? They got it all in a matter of months, like trying to binge-watch 5 seasons of a show in one weekend, with mandatory homework after each episode. Eventually, it became too much. The live service started to feel more like live slavery, and so many players just walked away. Not because they hated the game, but because keeping up felt like trying to outpace a runaway train with no brakes and no rest stops. For a game about heroes, Lost Ark sure made a lot of people feel like exhausted side characters in someone else's quest log. One of Lost Ark's early selling points was that it was already a massive success in Korea. Naturally, Western players were hyped. Finally, a polished MMO with years of content already done. What could go wrong? Well, turns out the answer was almost everything if you're stuck on the global version. Instead of enjoying a steady rollout of pre-built content, Western players quickly realized they were the awkward little sibling forever chasing behind Big Brother Korea. The Korean version of Lost Ark was always months, sometimes years ahead. This created a bizarre time travel scenario. Global players could watch Koreans on YouTube or Twitch play the shiny new classes and raids, but they couldn't touch them. It was like window shopping for an MMO you technically already owned. And by the time content did arrive in the West, the hype was already 6 feet under. Everyone had seen the boss mechanics, the new class skills, the gear sets. Nothing felt fresh anymore. The content wasn't new, it was just new to you, which doesn't hit the same when you've watched 10 streamers play it to death months earlier. Players begged Amazon to speed things up. Just release the damn Reaper already. But the answer was always some variation of, we're localizing and westernizing at our own pace. That westernization included things like putting shorts on the artist class for modesty's sake, which only sparked a bonus round of cultural drama. Because nothing says immersion like censorship debates in your fantasy MMO. Even worse, Korean servers often got better treatment. More generous honing buffs, better in-game events, faster bug fixes, things that Asmongold and other streamers flat out called out as unfair. Eventually, some of those quality-of-life changes did come to the West, but all was late, like hand-me-downs from your older sibling's closet. It created a fractured sense of community. While most MMOs try to build a unified global player base, Lost Ark accidentally split theirs in two. Western players were always behind, and worse, they knew they were behind. If a class was broken in Korea, you already knew the dumpster fire was headed your way in a few months, and you were powerless to stop it. If Korea reworked a system for the better, you just had to hope Amazon would copy-paste it before the next patch cycle. Some players got so fed up, they just ditched the global version entirely and jumped through VPN hoops to play on Korean servers. Others quit because the content felt like reheated leftovers. In the end, the East versus West divide left Lost Ark's global version in an identity crisis. It was never quite its own game, and never quite up to date, just stuck in a weird MMO purgatory, forever lagging behind its own potential. Combine all the mess we've already talked about, the relentless grind, the pay-to-win dynamics, the bot infestation, the breakneck update schedule, and the dev's talent for silence, and you've got a perfect recipe for mass burnout. By mid-2022, the honeymoon phase ended with all the grace of a collapsing Jenga tower. Playing Lost Ark stopped feeling like a game and started feeling like a second job. And not the cool kind where you get paid, but the soul-sucking kind where your boss is a spreadsheet and your coworkers are bots, farming silver in a straight line. People began to realize they weren't having fun. They were just logging in out of obligation or fear of falling behind. And let's be real, when your MMO starts to feel like a mandatory chore, the uninstall button starts looking mighty tempting. Regions that were once bustling with activity turned into ghost towns. Twitch streams that used to overflow with hype turned into nostalgic reruns or outright abandonment. Streamers like Asmongold, once Lost Ark's loudest cheerleaders, either voiced their disillusionment or peaced out entirely. YouTubers began uploading "Why I Quit Lost Ark" videos like it was a content trend. And the numbers? Brutal. From a god-tier 1.3 million concurrent players on Steam at launch to a steep, slippery slope downward. Within months, the population dropped like a legendary item with 3 useless stats. Server merges in the West were the final red flag. You don't merge thriving servers. By the time 2023 rolled in, Lost Ark's population had stabilized it, barely hanging on. Today, its daily peak is lower than some 5-year-old MMOs that never sniffed a tenth of Lost Ark's launch hype. That's a 97% drop. 97%. Gone. Vanished. Disappeared like a player trying to dodge a Guardian raid mechanic for the 20th time. It's like the entire party left the club, and only the DJ is left vibing with 2 hardcore fans still spamming alts. Eventually, Even the devs had to admit reality. A 2025 update sheepishly acknowledged that player retention isn't great and promised to ease progression. No kidding. When your player base pulls a Thanos snap on itself, not great might be the understatement of the decade. Burnout hit different players in different ways. Some nuked their installs mid-rage quit. Others faded out gradually, logging in less and less until one day they just didn't. Guilds that were once full of life and daily activity slowly became digital graveyards. The MMO tourists were long gone, but even the die-hard veterans, the ones who grinded every event, studied every meta build, started tapping out. The community vibe shifted from, "I'm in this for the long haul," to, "Let me know if they ever fix this treadmill." And that's the kicker. Lost Ark didn't just lose its players, it burned them out so efficiently, you'd think burnout was a feature. The real final boss of Lost Ark wasn't Valtan, Vicus, or even the chaotic jester Belshazzar. It was burnout. Let's take a moment to roast one of the most insidious features of Lost Ark's design that deserves a special place in the MMO Hall of Shame: the alt grind. Because why stop at burning out players with one character when you can squeeze their soul dry across 6? On paper, alts are optional. In practice, if you weren't running a squad of characters like some kind of Artesian sweatshop manager, you were falling behind. The game technically let you progress solo, but the moment you realized your one character could only drip feed you gold and mats while 6 others could be raking it in, the FOMO kicked in like a mule. Weekly gold from raids, daily dungeons for mats, funneling resources to your main. It was like running a corporation, a very sad, unpaid corporation. So what did ambitious players do? They built alt armies. And suddenly, logging in became a never-ending checklist of chaos dungeons, guardian raids, Una's tasks, stronghold micromanagement, rinse, repeat, and spiral into existential dread. What started as, "Hey, this is fun, I get to try out different classes," became, "Why am I running the same dungeon for the 9th time today while questioning my life choices?" Even Lost Ark's own official guide advised players not to make too many alts, or they'd get overwhelmed with dailies. That's not just a red flag. That's a neon billboard saying, "Turn back now." When the game itself is warning you that playing it might ruin your day, you know something's off. A couple chaos dungeons here, a guardian raid there, not bad. But Lost Ark doesn't do moderation. It wants you to inject this stuff into your veins daily, times 6. Every alt meant another loop of the same few activities, rapidly transforming the experience into a chore treadmill. The kind where you finish and think, did I even enjoy that? Or did I just do it out of habit and sunk cost syndrome? The real kicker is how this system encouraged obsessive, no-life gameplay. If you weren't doing the full rotation on half a dozen characters, you were playing wrong. Or worse, you were expected to swipe your way past the grind. The community sentiment was brutal. Play like a machine, or pull out the credit card. Casuals? Good luck climbing out of Tier 3 before the heat death of the universe. It was a pyramid scheme of grind. Your alts slaved away at the bottom so your main could enjoy a tiny, incremental benefit at the top. Meanwhile, the rest of Endgame, especially the weekly locked Legion raids, became stale fast. Once you've seen the inside of Valtan's raid 15 times, it turns from a thrilling boss fight into a spreadsheet simulator. Even the devs eventually admitted players were sick of running chaos dungeons, guardian raids, and Una's tasks. They called them repetitive and mundane. Gee, you think? Thousands of hours of the same dailies. Who wouldn't be thrilled? At its worst, Lost Ark didn't feel like a game. It felt like a job you didn't remember applying for. The kind where the HR department just hands you a daily list of chores and says, grind harder or fall behind. And while a small slice of ultra-hardcore players might have thrived in that ecosystem, for the rest, it was the last straw. Because here's the truth, an MMO should feel like an adventure, not a full-time unpaid internship with a daily punch card. Lost Ark's obsession with alt grinding efficiency didn't just wear people out, it burned them out. Badly. So here we are. Lost Ark went from hero to nearly zero, burning its player base out in record time. Is there a future for this once mighty MMO? Or is it destined to be a cautionary tale? Well, the story isn't completely over. In Korea, the game still chugs along with a dedicated fanbase, regular updates, and new classes. They recently celebrated their 4th anniversary with over 30 content updates. Clearly not a dead game over there. The global version, under Amazon's wing, is trying to course correct. After watching their player count nosedive like a bot caught mid-script, the devs have finally started addressing some of the core pain points. They've announced plans to ease the progression grind and make leveling less of a torture chamber. They're slashing honing costs, adding more accessible upgrade materials, and basically pleading, please come back. We promise it's less awful now. Better late than never, right? They've also ramped up the bot war with improved anti-cheat tools and more ban waves. Although let's be real, at this point, it's like playing whack-a-mole with titanium moles. The content cadence has finally slowed down too. Turns out throwing a fire hose of updates at your exhausted player base is not, in fact, the masterstroke they thought it was. Now there's a little breathing room between patches, hopefully dialing down that FOMO-fueled burnout loop. To their credit, Amazon and Smilegate are trying to shrink the Korea global patch gap. Quality of life changes that used to take months are showing up faster. Communication has improved. We're talking monthly dev blogs, actual transparency, even public surveys asking ex-players why they quit and what they'd need to return. It's equal parts hopeful and tragic, like an ex finally asking what went wrong after you've already packed your bags and changed your number. But here's the cold truth. Fixing Lost Ark's reputation isn't going to be as easy as flipping a patch switch. Many players have moved on, and trust in the brand has been torched. Comebacks can happen, just ask Final Fantasy XIV. But they're rare, and they take real commitment. Lost Ark still has some of the best combat in the MMO genre, and the Legion raids are absolute bangers when you're not buried in burnout. The core game can shine if you strip away the predatory monetization, relentless grind, and bot apocalypse. Maybe, just maybe, a big expansion or a Year 2 reboot could rekindle the magic. Or maybe Lost Ark will just ride out the rest of its life with a small, loyal fanbase, while the rest of the world remembers it as a cautionary tale, a flashy comet that burned way too hot and flamed out even faster. One thing's for sure, gamers have long memories, and they won't forget what happened here. No amount of cinematic trailers or high-octane combat can compensate for a game that treats players like walking wallets. Ignore your community, disrespect their time, and let your economy get overrun by bots, and you'll get what Lost Ark got, an empty world and a vanished player base. In the end, Lost Ark might have lived up to its name a little too well. Most of its players are, indeed, lost. This isn't just a roast, it's a warning. If there's ever a new Lost Ark, they better have learned their damn lesson. Otherwise, the only Ark they'll need is Noah's, to save the last surviving players from a flood of terrible decisions.